And without further ado, I'd like to invite Professor K.L. Dhammajoti, Chair Professor from School of Philosophy from Renmin University of China, to give the keynote speech with the theme, Intellectual Understanding versus Wisdom in Buddhist Education. So please join me to give a big hand to warmly welcome Professor Dhammajoti.
Can I put out a bit like this? Okay. Professor N. Holliday, Professor C.F. Lee, distinguished scholarly colleagues, and students and friends. First, I must express my gratitude to the organizers for inviting me to give this speech. I wasn't sure what it meant when I was told to give a keynote speech. Then I find that everybody is a keynote speaker, so that relieves me. So I was thinking of saying something maybe of kind of a general nature that perhaps can cover the whole conference theme. But finally I realized that probably I'm supposed to share with you my own thoughts on the topic. Yeah. I have the habit of going over time, so I'm not going to elaborate. Hopefully I shall just read my PPT. Firstly, the scope of my presentation. The theme, as everybody knows, is in search of a theoretical foundation for a wisdom-oriented education. So this defines in a way, the limited scope of my discussion here. And furthermore, my discussion will be confined to a brief preliminary survey only of Indian Buddhism. Having listened to Professor C.F. Lee's comments at the beginning, alluding to the type of wisdoms that is needed today for society to live harmoniously and to find meaning, and also wisdom, so-called, to solve problems in the family. I think you realize that the word wisdom is indeed a very vague term, and it corners so many things. And the type of wisdom that is mentioned in Professor Lee's remarks is a type of wisdom. And maybe I'm going to, in my presentation, perhaps go a little bit beyond that. And so in my presentation, I might sound like trying to take you to nirvana. I have not been there myself. But, you know, kind of too theoretical, you might say, too religious, you might say. But my purpose is actually to explore and also for my own self, to understand as Buddhist just what this wisdom means when you put up a theme, you know, entitled wisdom-oriented education. What it means or what it should mean. And then also, I think we can only do that by at least surveying the different traditions on this. And also to find out, to see how these ancient Buddhists were struggling to understand wisdom, that they experienced in the case of the Buddha in the perfect state. And also to continuously struggle to map out the whole path that leads to that kind of wisdom. So maybe it's a bit too abstract, but then the idea is that you should be able to feel inspiration from this and then apply whatever we think is appropriate to our level. That is to say, at the practical level. In Buddhism, so when I say wisdom, I'm actually referring to the Buddhist term paññā or prajñā, paññā in Pali. And we know that in both the Pali tradition as well as the northern traditions, for instance, Abhidharma and so on, say for instance, paññā in Pali actually conveys a whole range of whole levels of understandings. So it can be intellectual, it can be the type of pragmatic wisdom that Professor Lee and others have alluded to, but it also at its higher level can refer to the perfect wisdom of the Buddha, which in fact we don't know. We can't know until we reach that state. And we see this kind of sense of wonder in the time of the Buddha when Sariputta, was seen to realize that he acknowledged that he really could not fathom the profundity of the wisdom. Sariputta being the foremost Arhat disciple. So that tells us something about the wisdom of the Buddha. If Buddhists are serious to be followers of Buddha, I think we have to at least have some understanding, at least at our level, however much a distortion it may be. Whatever we say is going to be a distortion because it's all verbal and conceptual, right? But at least we can try to have some feeling and inspiration from this. That's Theravada. Likewise, in Sarvastivada and prajñā is one, as you know, is one of the so-called universal mental factor or concomitants, and it is the faculty, is the force in the universe that enables a human being to have the experience of understanding. So it's a faculty of understanding. And in fact, prajñā does not immediately mean something positive, like wisdom. It can be knowledge, in fact it can be wrong knowledge, impure knowledge, and even a concept like the non-defined ignorance or nescience is also a form of prajñā. So from the Buddhist text, the word prajñā, which I have rendered roughly as wisdom, in fact covers a range of meaning also. So talking about the search of the Buddha's perfect wisdom, as I said, we should note that it started since the Buddha's own days. I have given the example just now. And then it was continued in the Abhidharma tradition, and then the earliest Mahayana texts, and then other minor traditions, and so on. So I'm just going to very briefly survey these different traditions on the understanding, on their struggle, on their attempt to understand what really wisdom is and how to reach that wisdom. What are the prerequisites for the wisdom? This is, when I said Abhidharma, I don't just mean the northern Abhidharma, like the type that you see in the Abhidharma Great Commentary or Abhidharma Kosa Bhashya that you are familiar with. Even Abhidharma in the Pali, we know, begin to elaborate and try to figure out what this is. What makes the Buddha wisdom superior to, for instance, that of the Arahat? So what are the defective factors in the so-called, again, wisdom of the Arahat? And we find, for instance, in the Atthakathas, that is the commentaries, and also in the sub-commentaries, Pali meditators talking about this, talking about the whole notion of the traces, the residual traces, besides the defilement themselves, but the defilement leave behind traces. So they also speak in a very similar way to the doctrines of Noto Abhidharma, that the perfect wisdom, like that of the Buddha, can only be achieved when all defilements, together with their traces, not just defilement but together with traces, are fully eradicated. And they have this term like vasana, savasana, kilesa bhanam, that is abandonment of defilement together with traces, and also a very, very important called yena avarana, that correspond to the northern term jineya avarana, shuo zhi zhang in Chinese. So this shows that the whole question of wisdom and the perfection of it, and why even the Arhat could not gain that perfection, perfect state. All this have been in the mind since Buddha days and throughout the ages, right? Yeah. So first, to give you, to share with you the difference between. So I state to begin with that wisdom, as we see in these Buddhist traditions, is much more than intellectual understanding, to say the least. It goes far beyond conceptual understanding. However good, however useful socially, sociologically, it's much more than that. And so to give you a feel of the difference as hinted, as conveyed in first the Pali tradition, I like to quote very briefly the story of Bahia. He was a merchant. He didn't have any religious background. He was not a monk. He apparently didn't even listen to the Buddha's teaching. And to cut the story short, one day after a shipwreck, he landed. He floated to a land. And there he literally had nothing. And so he survived on begging for food and wearing barks, tree barks and so on. So then he came to be respected, to be seen as a saint, such a detached person living such a simple life and so on. And they thought he was Arahant, and he was eventually himself made to understand he was Arahant. Then a kind Devata, a divine being, told him, "No, you are under illusion. Get out of illusion. If you are interested in being Arahant, go to the Buddha and seek his permission, seek his instruction," which he did. He realized that, in fact, his earlier understanding was a conceptual one, and however sincere he was, indeed he was mistaken. So that was conceptual understanding. Yeah, and then the Buddha gave him a brief teaching, and practicing that as he was listening, it says, he became enlightened, because there was a teaching actually on the meditation of pure awareness. So I think that prepares us for the subsequent discussions. Yeah. So first, we see that here is a contrast between conceptual understanding and then wisdom in the real sense. Wisdom, that is to say, that is liberating. So Bahia, this merchant, right, turned ascetic, was finally liberated because of wisdom. Yeah. So the Pali discourses also, some discourses offer some very concrete teaching on what the requisites should be to lead to this kind of wisdom. So for the sake of time, I'll just quote very briefly just one sutta called the Paññā Sutta as an example. It doesn't mean that it's confined to that sutta. So in this sutta, in the Anguttara Nikaya, we see, in summary, that the requisites are this. First, there must be commitment The first starting point, commitment, to seek and to enter into a spiritual relationship with the teacher. So this is quite different from the classroom type of situation. You know, we have taught here in some classes there are a couple of hundreds of students. You don't know who they are, and they listen to you, and then they go home. You know, and some are trying to be smart and getting ready to challenge you before you finish speaking. You know, so to say the least, there is no spiritual relationship. That this is a requisite according to this sutta. So first, you must make a decision. Do you want wisdom? If you do, make the first move. Take the initiative. You have to enter into a spiritual relationship with your teacher. That hence, you know, the whole tradition of a monastic training between the teacher and the guru. Okay, this is the first one. I'm sorry, I didn't. I'm not used to the computer here. Yeah, I've done this, so I'm on this slide. You can see that. The first one is commitment. Second one is the student, the pupil must develop love and respect to the teacher. Again, something missing today. You want to go to the most famous professor and, you know, and most knowledge, but that's understandable. But wisdom cannot, in the true sense, cannot be acquired without some inner involvement, your feeling, your emotions, like love and respect. This is one. And then it says that there must be a sense of shamefulness, moral shamefulness, hirottapa, in himself. And then the next is he must, having listened, transform his life. This is a real application. You know, now these days people talk about application of Buddhism, Buddhist knowledges, and they bring all kinds of technologies and spend a lot of money, and that's good. Yeah, that intention is good. But then my humble feeling is that we should not fit Buddhism into this modern system, but rather, if at all, I think it is meaningful. We should really try to see all these suggestions in the modern areas, disciplines, from the point of view of Buddhism, of the Dhamma. So it's the other way around. It's not fitting Buddhism into these conceptual systems. I think only then we can expect to develop our wisdom. Okay, so applying Buddhism in the real sense, it is a misnomer to talk about application of Buddhism in a sense, because Buddhism must be application. If not, it is not the Dhamma. It's not Buddhism in the real sense. So here he's talking about applying Buddhism in the real sense to transform your living, not just listening to this, not just waiting for society to give you approval. You don't need that. You must sincerely, from within you, if you have realized, you have glimpsed, you have felt the truth, apply it to your life. Yeah. So this is one thing. This is application in the true sense, living, and then he must continue to practice, to practice, and then, which means, among other things, he must continue to disentangle himself from socialization. Yeah, changing your value structure. I'm speaking from this sutta. These are not my own ideas, so you can check on this. And then finally, in this sutta, it speaks of developing the insight, hence meditation now. Insight into impermanent of khantas. So to say the least, these requisites are far beyond those of a modern classroom or modern educated system. Now, next I come to Abhidharma. And despite the common label, we know Abhidharma is now often translated as scholasticism, which I don't agree, which is, of course, not to deny that it has scholastic element of classicism, but it's fundamentally a soteriology and concerned with the attainment of spiritual insight and wisdom. Yeah? You can look at important books like the Mahavibhasha, like the Abhidharma and so on. You see the proportion about practice and about realizations, about spiritual attainment is far exceeds the so-called scholastic type of analysis. Yeah. But Abhidharma doesn't deny the importance of study. That's a beautiful thing. So Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism and other forms of Buddhism also do not deny, and they do give due place to study. You need to start from where you are. Talk about nirvana, but you talk about emptiness, talk about mere consciousness, but you are where you are. We work from our conceptualizing mind, with our conceptual mind. So you start with studying and understanding. But for Abhidharma, this is just a preparation. And then the whole path is very clear. As an ordinary being, then at one point you must be transformed into the so-called Arya. If not, you're not really following Buddhism, or you fail. Nothing less than the transformation. So in that sense, we say Buddhism is creative because the product is the new man, i.e. an Arya, a noble one, a saint, so-called. So you start with there, and then how do you transform that? It's very interesting, very, very specific. You must enter into meditative experience, the so-called the path of vision, Darshana Marga. Without doing that, however much you struggle and how much you have removed defilement as an ordinary person, all these are just preliminary. It won't transform you substantially. You must, one day, everybody must enter into that path, that's a meditative path, called the path of insight or path of vision. That is called Darshan Marga. And then that story is not finished yet, and you have to continue after that on a higher path called the path of transformation, the Bhavana Marga. So in this way, we can see the path is a path of meditative transformation. That is for the sake of gaining wisdom. And in the Sarasivada, it has innovated a very important doctrine called I have mentioned just now, very quickly. That is the doctrine of a non-defined nation. That is to say that the fact that Arahat's wisdom is not quite on the par of the Buddha, it's not as perfect as the Buddha, because there's certain force operating, even in Arahat, who is said to have again attained wisdom. So you see that the relativity of the term wisdom, and that is called non-defined ignorance or nescience. Ignorance usually is a defilement, right? Is a sine qua non for any negativity. But here they are talking about a type of cognitive force, a negative one in this case, right? That prevents the practitioner from attaining perfect wisdom. That's a big topic, and we don't have time to go into this. But they innovated this doctrine called the Aklishta Ajnana, or the non-defined ignorance, and that, I just want to say that it comes to impact on other Abhidharma school as well as I can see, Mahayana, both the prajñā paramita lineage as well as the Yogacara lineage. Everybody came to be aware of this, and came to be occupied with understanding the perfect wisdom in terms of, or rather the defects of the imperfect wisdom in terms of this concept. And then it said that this non-defined ignorance is not a defilement, right? And it can only be completely removed. Very interesting. In a meditation, again, meditation is a samadhi. This samadhi is called Vajra Upama Samadhi, the Vajra-like samadhi. So I hope to highlight to you that the whole path of Abhidharma, despite the label of Stoicism, is in fact a part of meditation, a part of transformation through meditation. And that's, of course, for the attainment of wisdom. Now, coming to the early Mahayana text, let me know if I'm going through time. Yeah? Again, I have time only to highlight a few. What we see is, first of all, the topmost requisite for the attainment of wisdom in the spiritual sense, right? Perfection of wisdom. That is existential commitment. The commitment, vow, will, at the very depth of human existence. itself. So I call it existential. And this is discussed in the form of bodhicitta. I think you know that term, putishin, buddhism, and pranidhana, Yuen, unique. And of course, sometimes other terms like adhyasaya, and so on. Yeah. So, what can we learn from this? What's the inspiration we can get from this? It is that to gain wisdom in the true sense, the heart must be involved, not just your brain, not just the intellect. Now coming to some more provocative statement from, again, one of the earliest Mahayana texts, not the earliest, but one of the very earliest. This is the Ratnakuda. It has a statement like that a bodhisattva, so this is marking the bodhisattva of the so-called earlier paths. Yeah? The reason is they develop the so-called bodhisattva ideal, the so-called Mahayana, because they realize that they need a path, a concrete path, to gain the perfection vision of the Buddha. Yeah. So the idea just now of the non-defined ignorance, I feel this is the key clue. I think one of the most important clue for us to understand the development of the so-called Mahayana movement. So it's like that Bodhisattva is generated bodhicitta. At the moment he generates bodhicitta, he surpasses all Sravaka and Prajñā Buddhas. That means that the so-called Tuyana, often sometimes called the so-called Hinayana. Yeah? So Bodhisattva at the very first time when he generates this bodhisattva, bodhicitta, he already surpasses. Then further it states that a Sravaka, even though accomplished in ethical training and ascetic practices and meditation, very interesting, he will never awaken to supreme perfect enlightenment. We call it wisdom. Talk about wisdom today in this conference. But this is a little bit, in a way, shocking, in a bit rude maybe, you might think, extreme. But I think we should be humble to sense their intention. What they want to say is that that no amount of, in terms of education system, right? No amount of book knowledge, no amount of technology, no amount of modern theories can lead you to wisdom in this sense, in this true sense. If you go in that direction, it's not a question of just being quantitative in your so-called wisdom or qualitative. You go horizontally, you can never reach wisdom. You have to kind of take a leap to a higher level. Yeah, to the spiritual level. And so this is the emphasis. We should see it in a positive way, instead of reacting to it negatively. We should see it in the way that it is an emphasis again on the involvement of the will and the determination. Without that, at the very beginning, you start in the wrong direction. Just like today, you talk about wisdom-oriented meditation, education. What wisdom are you talking about? What do you want in your education system? I think these are questions you have to ask yourself, at least for Buddhists. Yeah, this is the Buddhist conference. I'm not entitled to speak of wisdom in other systems, and I don't deny that the relative values in Western philosophy or other thought systems. I'm just saying that as Buddhists, if we are seriously interested in a wisdom-oriented education, first ask yourself, what do you mean by wisdom? What really do you want? So I now introduce you to another very early Mahayana Sutra called the Drumma Kinara Raja Paripricha. This is only in Tibetan, and we have 2 Chinese versions. And here it spells out the presupposition of the bodhicitta. That is not as a bodhicitta, not as like, enlightenment thought. It's not just a mere thought, not a concept, not even a will. Sure, will is better than a concept, but it is the bodhicitta to be, and then this bodhicitta has to be continuously cultivated and enhanced increasingly at higher levels, and only finally you gained the type of wisdom as in enlightenment. So this sutra is very beautiful, and the Buddha, conjure up the musicians, divine beings, and his dharma is sung out in music. It's a beautiful idea, the kind of aesthetics, the kind of appreciation for music and art, in Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism. That's a wonderful thing, but I have no time to talk about that now. So the question is kind of sounded out through music, and then the other type of musician, Bodhisattva, answer the question. Yeah. The question is, how to generate bodhicitta? We talk about it. This is the will, this is the determination, right? And that has got to be much more than a conceptual one, intellectual one, not even will in the ordinary sense. So how to generate that and sustain it until one arrives at enlightenment? This is to make it very brief. And the answer is this: being accomplished in firm determination for the sake of sentient being, one endowed with great compassion will not forget the bodhicitta. So the question was how to generate it and then not to forget it, to sustain it until enlightenment. So first of all, it already spells out the importance of bodhicitta, right, as a starting point. And not only as a starting point, as a continuous spiritual experience. For one better term, I'm using the term spiritual. There might be objection, of course. This again, one very vague English term. Unfortunately, we are speaking in the English language. So, yeah. So the answer is this: being accomplished first in firm determination. Yeah. Hak play sampa. Senpai is the kind of is ashaya. So this means adi ashaya. Adi means very profound, very deep kind of determination, inclination towards it. You have to begin with that. You can't think of wisdom in a cold, scientific way. You can never get it. You feel like you want to get it, and you feel very deeply, as I say, at the very level of existence, then it will work, right? So, and the other thing to note in the answer is that one endowed with great compassion. Here, compassion must be involved to gain wisdom, according to Buddhism. Are these things really that abstract? I mean, we can develop. You know what I mean when I say compassion and love. We all have them as innate human qualities. We all have the capacity for strong determination, capacity for faith and receptivity. These are positive qualities. Eric Fromm, for instance, speaks of this as a positive human qualities. He was a professor of psychology. It's wonderful that he saw it that way. So here is one endowed with great compassion will not forget the bodhicitta. Then when in that sense you can sustain it. And finally, gradually wisdom comes to be perfected. Okay. So this same sutra also has another very interesting statement. And just now we saw a kind of provocative statement from early text called the Ratnakuda, which says that no amount of extravagant training in ethics, in even meditations and learning can lead you to wisdom, because that's the different domain to begin with, right? And here you can compare the statement I'm going to read to you, right, to that. So it says that it is on account. The question is, how does one come to be established in pure morality? Of course, that is a concern of all religionist practitioners. But interesting answer is that, well, in fact, you need bodhicitta. Yeah, and the bodhicitta, the Changtup Senpa, on account of it, then one become endowed with sila. Where there is this existential view for the sake of all sentient beings, which doesn't exclude yourself, then there is morality. There's true morality. So morality is only significant when it is out of such a context of existential commitment, of compassion. Yeah, so as I said, we should not defensively react to such statement that I said earlier in the Ratnakuda, but really rather trying to humbly appreciate the stress that no truly wisdom-oriented education is possible. I'm afraid I have to put in such strong term, unless our emotion and volition are deeply involved at the deepest existential level. This goes far beyond the domain of mere ordinary intellectual training. Now I have to go a little bit fast. So let me introduce you to another early Mahayana Sutra. I think people here would have heard about it. It's called the Asta Sahasrika Prachaparameka Pachin Chongpoye. It's extremely important doctrinally and historically in terms of evolution of Mahayana, because I believe that the first chapter, at least the earlier part of the first chapter, must have been the core in the textual evolution. So it's very, very important. And there we don't, interesting thing, we don't see a confrontation between the so-called monastic or the mainstream Buddhism on the one hand and the emerging Mahayana Bodhisattva on the other. In fact, when I read it, my impression is that these new Mahayanis, Bodhisattvas, were trying to gain the understanding and sympathy of the conservative. Now, the central doctrine, of course, is perfection of wisdom. This is the meaning of prajñā paramita. But noticeably, interesting, it connects up with early teaching of actually anatta, nairatmya, not the non-existence of the dharma as non-ontic entities, right? Is not explained in terms of shunyata as we expect, the common term in prajñā paramita, but in terms of no-selfness, non-selfness. That's very interesting. And then, so this is, so first we note that in this sutra, the principal exponent, who is that? He is Subhuti. Subhuti was an early disciple, said to be foremost in forest dwelling, in the practice of non-dispute or non-conflict called arana. Yeah, and that is true meditation on no self. And to cut the story short, in fact, so this is this point is shared by both the Pali tradition and the tradition, Mahayana tradition, certainly at least the prajñā paramita. And then there is a story in the Mahavibhasha. I have no time to give you the full detail, but there's a reference there. Right? It relates how Subhuti, was so profoundly, deeply absorbed in the meditation of no self that when he came out, he couldn't even answer the question when asked, "Who are you?" Well, there's no I, no who. He was stuck for a long time, and then he was able to answer. So all this is to show you that the emphasis of this chapter 1 of the Asta Swastika, which I believe to be among the very earliest of Mahayana Sutra, advocates the position that wisdom must be gained through meditation. Subhuti is a representative of the forest dweller, is one of the he's the foremost meditators, right? And what does he meditate on? No selfness. Yeah. And then furthermore, in this same sutta I'm talking about, the earliest part, I'm still talking about the earliest part of this sutta, chapter 1, the earlier paragraph. It speaks of one meditation. Again, meditation, samadhi. Yeah? I translate here as equipoise. And he has a very interesting name. It's called Sarva Dharma Aparigruhita Nama Samadhi. Yeah? So samadhi name the non-clinging to all dharmas. Prajñā is about non-clinging. Yeah? So here, the point to note is that this new doctrine set to mark off and mentioned for the very, very first time in this sutra, yeah, is named a meditation. His name a meditation is a samadhi, and has a specific name. Yeah. And then he said this meditation is unshared, asadharana, patkong, pukong, unshared by the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha. So then is uniquely Mahayana, uniquely Bodhisattvayana. And it is none other than a meditation. So it's a powerful reminder by this sutra that to gain perfect wisdom, you must go through meditation. Ask ourselves, how well education system is devised today for so-called wisdom orientation. Is meditation involved? At least something like this we can get inspiration from. And in some slightly later Prajñā Paramita, I'm talking about still in this tradition, again, it follows. It inherited the Abhidharma notion of perfect wisdom. That shows that they are also trying to find out just why the Buddha's wisdom was perfect, why the Arahant's wisdom was not perfect. Right? Again, they speak in terms of the so-called vasana 嘅習氣啊。你可以清除一切嘅煩惱，但係煩惱會產生習氣，習呢就真正艱難嘅。That's what I spoke in Chinese. I forgot. Now, this is called the vasana, the idea, 習氣of vasana. Okay, so it speaks like that the Buddha's perfect wisdom, right, is attained because he alone. Now, this is on the power of Abhidharma doctrine. He alone, Buddha alone, is completely, absolutely free from not only defilements but the traces, the vasanas. Yeah? And here he says like this: so long as so to gain that wisdom, what do you have to do? Of course, you practice your paramitas and all these things. Finally, however, you come to a stage when you have to enter into a very powerful meditation. That's called. It has a name. It's called Vajra. I have already mentioned that. It's called Vajra. Vajrupama Samadhi. And it says like I'm quoting the word, translating very literally. So long as the Vajralaya Samadhi has not been acquired, he does not gain the perfect wisdom, the cut it short, the Sara Akara Jinya. As a result of acquiring the meditation, that Samadhi, with the prajñā conjoined therewith in a single moment, just one moment, at that time you enter into that meditation. After that moment, all your defilements without traces are cut off. Then only you can gain the perfect wisdom of the Buddha. So, the lesson we learn is, the point we should be inspired about is that this wisdom that we try to acquire must go through different meditations. And this tradition about cutting off all the remaining residue defilements, besides defilement, but there are traces also, in the Vajra-like Samadhi actually is also Abhidharma doctrine. That, by the way, that's why I emphasize and understand Abhidharma, not to think of it as Hinayana, as think of it as scholasticism or mere philosophy, but we learn a lot about Buddhism, about practice and realization there. Okay, then Yogacara finally. Even more so, the central test of meditation is very conspicuous, of course. Yogacara, the term itself, directly implies spiritual practice. This is yoga achara, practice, particularly meditation practiced. Yeah? And in fact, as we understand, the earliest members of the Yogacara school actually came from the meditating master called the Yujiashi Yogacharas, who figure in Mahavibhasha. They were the meditators who evolved into the Mahayanist Yogacharas, and we can show evidence for that. Yeah? And this school also essentially inherited the past structure I explained just now. You know, preparatory as a totally ordinary wordling, and then coming into the path of meditation called path of vision. Then transformation is a very key word they had to remember. Without transformation, you don't have wisdom. Then becoming an Arya, and then from there, other parts, the whole procedure, the whole structure is actually from Abhidharma. Again, that shows the importance of understanding Abhidharma. Yeah? Finally, in other Yogacara texts, I just have time to quote only one more, and we know an important early sutta called the Sandhi Nirmochana Sutta, the Kaisamat King. It's said to be one of the very earliest. This is what it states. All the parameters have great compassion as their cause. You practice a parameter not because you want to fulfill the expectation from your tradition. You practice a ethical precept not because you want to obey, you want to be recognized and accepted by your community. No, it must be from your heart. Now, what is that? That is the heart of compassion. So all the parameters practice have Mahakaruna, had great compassion as the cause. It says here. And then about the fruit, well, all the desirable retributions, maturation, and also benefiting all sentient beings. That's compassion. Yeah. So you want to fulfill the parameters so that you can benefit all sentient beings. This is compassion. And all these are linked up. The compassion, without this kind of compassion, you can't be motivated enough to perfect your wisdom. So wisdom is perfected through compassion. And finally, in perfect enlightenment, perfect wisdom, the two are one. So once again, the Buddhist practice are propelled and sustained by great compassion, and this culminates in wisdom of enlightenment, and as we see in the Yogacara. So I have very briefly, very quickly outlined the search for wisdom and the way they try to map out a path towards it. So now I come to the conclusion. To explore as Buddhist a theoretical foundation for a wisdom-oriented education, as the title of this conference says, we need first to ascertain the notion of wisdom, as well as not only the notion, as well as the requisite. How do we attain it? Yeah, as taught in the Buddhist traditions, and hence the importance of tradition. We can react to tradition and say, oh, we speak of, our traditions speak of spirit, and not the letter, not the formality. But without the letter, what spirit is that? Of what? Yeah. So for instance, we must thank the Theravada tradition for being an orthodox tradition, so that today, whatever interpretations, development in our understanding on the Buddha teaching has a valid basis. So at least we can understand. As I said, it looked like we have tried to reach Nirvana, which of course we will fail. But then let's come back down to earth. What can we learn from all this in the spiritual way? Let me summarize like this. First of all, wisdom is spiritual insight transcending the domain of intellectual knowledge. So hence my title, Conceptual Understanding versus, not and, versus wisdom. And this is the complete unfoldment of the human potential. To be a true human being, like Fromm said, to be alive at all, means to unfold your potential as a human being. We all have that potential. We also unfold it. Call it Buddhism or whatever you like, or by another name. Yeah? Well, that potentiality raised to the highest is enlightenment. So it's not just very lofty, empty talk. It's something that really, like Fromm says, he says religion is rooted in man's existence. We all need the religion in that sense. Yeah, of course I'm going to talk about it towards the end now. So this is the first point. Secondly, even leaving aside all these lofty metaphysical or theoretical implications and ramifications, right, we can understand the function of wisdom, right, as enabling us to see reality truly as it is. That is common to all schools of Buddhism. Free from all psychological conditionings. All knowledge are conditioned by our craving, hatred, ignorance, our jealousy, our egotistic, mind frame, and so on. So we don't see things truly as we superimpose from our experience, from our conditioning. Yeah. So wisdom is that, in other words, from our survey, is that which enables us to see things truly as they are. So as a result, the also important thing, as a result of seeing things truly as they are, then we gain perfect harmony and peace. That's what we want, and that's what is most needed today at this juncture. We need peace. We need harmony. And that means we need wisdom. Yeah. So this, rather than the mere acquisition of intellectual knowledge, I believe should be the ideal of a so-called wisdom-oriented meditation. Oh. Then next, we have talked about compassion. Right? Compassion, we have seen, is inseparable from wisdom. Various terms are used, we have seen that. Inseparable as a means, as well as an integrated end. That is to say, we need compassion to start the journey to arrive at wisdom. That's the means. And when we perfect wisdom through compassion, then compassion and wisdom at the highest level are one. They're not separable. Yeah. Next, all Buddhist traditions agree that the attainment of wisdom requires nothing less than a revolutionary transformation. I've emphasized that word. Let's see if an education system can result in some kind of transformation, not just a continuous horizontal knowledge, acquisition of knowledge or techniques or scanning of a brain or whatever. Yeah? Restructuring of our consciousness. And this is possible only through, another point, meditation. We have seen that. I'm just summarizing. And we also saw that the topmost prerequisite, the sine qua non of a trainee, is his existential commitment. That commitment is more than just a simple view of volition, but volition as the quintessence of volition. In Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism, this is explained in terms of vow, Bodhisattva vow, or in terms of, this is pranidhana, or in terms of bodhicitta. We mentioned that point, extremely interesting. By the way, I'm giving a course of lectures on this at our center, on the whole idea of Mahayana Buddhism and bodhicitta. And so I could not resist putting in this point. And also other terms like adhyasana, I've explained that term, which is a kind of a deep, firm resolution. This is the topmost prerequisite. Do we have this if we want to start the wisdom-oriented meditation, education? So, now I'm going to be a little bit provocative now finally. This implies that, strictly speaking, wisdom-oriented education is truly possible only in the domain of religion. I know many will react to me. You are frightening away people from Buddhism or from practice. No. Religion, inverted commas, I said, that is religion in the true sense, not in the sense of going to church or praying to the Buddha, for your confession and so on. Not like that. Religion in the true sense. So let me then here quote Erich Fromm, the Frommian notion of what they call humanistic religion, and I recommend you to, for reason of time, we cannot elaborate, but I recommend you to a couple of books. Several books he mentioned. One is called Man for Himself, and please, if you want to understand more. Now he says that, as I have already mentioned, that religion in the true sense is not a choice. You cannot choose religion or not. The only choice is that what kind of religion? Is it a religion that leads you further and further, in the path of unfolding your human potential? Is it a religion that obstruct you, that prevent you, so they instill fear in you, for instance, and obedience and so on? Yeah. So this is what he means. So he says, religion, of course, admittedly, a difficult term to define. Yeah. Usually, it involves the notion of God and so on. But he said that he tries to find a kind of a religion, a concept that can apply to both theistic and non-theistic, humanistic and non-humanistic type of religions. And this he defines as, in this sense, he defines religion as a frame of orientation with a specific goal of devotion. So in that sense, a scientist is devoted to a goal. He has his own very structure, his own belief in the validity of science. That is also religion. Okay, a logician too. So unless we come into this domain, that is a domain, what I'm trying to say is much more than just ethical behavior, and be respectable in society, and being up to date in science and psychology of the day. Not like that. Yeah? You must, your heart, we have seen that term, literally bodhicitta puraisamma, it's heart, that must be deeply, deeply, deeply involved. All your emotions, human capacity of love, compassion, of faith, of receptivity, must be involved. And this is what I mean by the domain of religion. Unless you come to that depth or level, I do not think it's meaningful to speak of a wisdom-oriented education. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the very inspiring presentation from Professor Dhammajoti. I think we all learn much more deeper what is really religion and what's wisdom, what wisdom really means in what we call wisdom-oriented education.